Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm so excited to get to talk with Dr. Dawn today about her work with families. And I've told you a bit about her and the work that she does, but I just want to welcome you to the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you here, fellow author, and also, even more importantly, the work that you do and the message that your books can relay onto families today. So, you're obviously a leader in the work of special needs and severe developmental delays with children and families. Can you tell me, what is your journey? How did you get to the place that you are at today in helping families?
Well, it actually started when I started going to junior college. I worked in my mom's classroom. She was a kindergarten teacher. And so I was receiving credit at the junior college for that. And so she kind of taught me how to be a teacher and how to care for the students and the families. And then when I started working in special ed, I actually started as an assistant. And I had two amazing teachers that mentored me. And they're the ones that kept me in what I'm doing and helped me to fight for our students. And I don't think if I had not had those two mentors as an assistant, I probably would not have stayed. Most teachers leave. The first year is the hardest, and five years, you're lucky. If you've gone past 5 years, then you're doing good. And I've been teaching for 21 years at least, and I was an assistant for 3.5 years after that. So, I've hung in there and have had some incredible experiences with my students and my parents. I was very lucky when I started as an assistant, and when I became a teacher, I actually took the same students with me. And I got two very, very great aides we had the same philosophy. And that's really important in the classroom, is to have the same philosophies. And we got to keep the students. Our students stay until their 22nd birthday. So we went from the junior high, the elementary, to the junior high, to the high school. And then we had an adult center in the community. And we kept the same students, and we had a little business, and we went everywhere. They worked in the community. They worked in the college, and we just had a great time until they just graduated and grew up.
So in the adult center, they get to stay there until they're 22?
In
or was that
special
even
ed, it's
okay?
Anywhere. In special ed, they stay up until their 22nd birthday. And that could be on campus. It depends on where they're located, depends on their abilities.
Okay. All right. And then in the adult center, they got to go even further than that.
Well, they stayed until their 22nd birthday, and they were able to, we rode the city bus to the college, and they took a restaurant class. They got college credit. We worked in probably 5 different businesses in the little town that we lived in. We made these Christmas trees out of hangers. We put lights on them and garland, and the students made them all, and we sold them. And so we used that to fund a lot of our bus trips. And we went all over the place, to the beach, to the movies. I grew up in the mountains. I live in Southern California, and I grew up in a small town. And we got to go snow skiing when we were growing up. So I was teaching in the same district, and I wanted my students to have that same experience. So I got some grants, and we went snow skiing for about 4 years. We did that. And if I had not had such a solid relationship with the parents, we would not have been able to do that. And all of my students participated. I had some high ones who learned how to snowboard. And then I had some other ones that they called them reins, and they hooked them to the front of the skis, and they were guided by the ski instructors. And then there were other ones who might have seizure disorders or weren't strong enough. They actually were in a sled, and they took them down in the sled. So they got to do that, and it was just amazing. We loved it. There was one time, though, the wind was blowing, and it actually blew the chair off the wheel that makes it go around.
Oh, goodness gracious.
And one of my little girls was on there. And so I'm standing under there, I don't know what I was going to do, catch her, but I'm just standing underneath there. And the ski instructors were like, ma'am, you have to go over there. And I said, no, I'm her teacher, and I'm staying right here until you bring her down. And, me, I would have been terrified, that it's swinging, and she had to get on this little piece of wood, sit on this little piece of wood, and they got her down by the rope. And she was perfectly fine. And I would have been like hysterical, but I'm like, oh, we're going, you know. So we've had some experiences when we were in the high school. I wanted to take them swimming with the dolphins because I love doing that. I've done that in several different places. So we arranged to go to SeaWorld. And my students, we had one of those thermometers that you see where they raise money. So we had one of those, and we recycled and made our Christmas trees and all of this. And we actually went swimming with the dolphins in SeaWorld, and all of the parents got to come for free. And we put our wetsuits on and we did that. And it was amazing.
Wow. Wow. And I I know that knowing the parents and having that relationship with the parents and with the family and that continuation of that relationship is so, so, so important. Even with, so my oldest daughter, when we just were jumping around schools with her, we couldn't find quite a right fit. And we finally found a really good fit, but it was in a private school and it was really expensive. And I had 3 kids coming up underneath, and there was no way that we were going to be able to sustain that. And so we did transition to a public school, but I had a relationship with that teacher that I knew that she was going to get that following year for about 6-7 months before she went in. And we would talk, and we met a couple of times, and we really went over, you know, how best for Skyla, my oldest, to be transferred or transitioned into a public school. And so her first year was great. But then after that, I realized, and it really started going down her experience in the public school system. And I realized I didn't have that relationship that I had with that first teacher, and we didn't get to talk as much, and she didn't get to know my child as much before she was a student of hers, and even throughout the entire year. And so year after that, we started noticing some decline. So anyway, that was part of the reason in our story why we started homeschooling 7 years ago. And now she's over in the public school for high school, and she does dual enrollment with college. But it really was that relationship between the parents and that communication between parents and child, especially I think if you have this, you know, severe developmental delays in your family going on, is imperative. And my mom actually worked in the special education for years after I graduated high school and left home. She started working as an assistant in the elementary schools, which over the course of a couple of decades ended up that she was an assistant in the middle schools for special education for several years. And the stories that I would hear were inspiring and heartbreaking, depending on the family and the communication that was going on between teacher, parent, child, and that whole trio dynamic there. So with that, you know, in the 6570 family project, when we're really focusing on these, you know, these 6570 days, that we are the high impact, high influence in their lives, which if they have severe developmental delays is maybe even longer than that, and maybe even a lifetime. But still within that time, we're talking about developing as a parent, as a child, helping your child develop, and as a team, which you as a teacher, as a special needs teacher, would be a part of that team as well. You were developing, you know, vision, discipline, resilience, and vulnerability in there. And resilience, I think, is something that I would love to hear you speak on there. Resilience from the parent's perspective, from your perspective as the teacher, and also from the child, and any stories that you have in there, because I know it's so imperative in order to help build that leg, the resilience.
Sometimes the parents come in and they're just, they have nothing left.
Yeah.
You know, their child has been in the hospital, or they have severe behaviors. You know, it affects the families, the marriages, the siblings, and sometimes the siblings get forgotten. You know, because the child with the child with special needs needs so much, and so when they come to us, they need to understand that we're on their side. You know, we're their support system. We're not, you know, the enemy. You know, sometimes they think the system itself, but we are a team. Like you said, we have the teacher and we have the parent, the student, There's whatever services there are, there's administration. You go to them and you say, I need this, or I don't know what to do. I have parents who say, I don't know what to do. I had a little boy, he was actually just doing something teenagers does. He was getting on YouTube, and she's like, I don't know what to do. And I said, he's 12. He's acting like a 12-year-old. It's okay. Set up a rule, do the YouTube, block the YouTube so you're going to see kids. And then they were fine, but you have to remember that they're children. They're children who have special needs. So, right. Sometimes we forget that, or they become so, the children get this learned helplessness where they're just so ingrained on not doing things on their own. So there are a lot of the resilience and just being able to bounce back and to know that, you know what, you're not going to be perfect, and it's going to change from moment to moment. I have autistic students where they're having severe behaviors, and one week this works, and the next week it doesn't work at all. There's a lot of give and take, and you just have to do it from your heart. I think that's what keeps you going. Something I did, I just actually had a meeting today with the parent, and I forgot to bring the article. I was like, oh, I did this. So this is one of the things we did with the workability, is we work for a company, a little store up here in the mountains, and they put tags on the hats, the winter hats. And so this is him doing it. And I was telling his dad, because he's part of the workability program, and I'm like, oh, I didn't bring the article to show you, but we get movie tickets and we ride this community bus and we get to go to the movies. So they learn all sorts of skills from this. But when I started, after they closed my young adult center because everybody grew up, then we started, I started in a whole new district with a whole new set of students, and they were lower functioning. And I was trying to get them out onto the campus and go to lunch and things. And I got a lot of resistance from on campus, the teachers, the staff. They didn't think our students should be out of their classrooms. And so I would talk to the parents about what I was trying to teach them and why I was trying to teach them this, how to stand in line, how to go out in the community. Oh, you're not taking my child in the community because they can't take them out. We took them out and they ran off, and it's like, no, we need to teach them. A lot of the parents get to the point where they don't even take their child anywhere with them. They leave them at home so they can run their errands, but that isn't functional. That isn't right. Functional for them. So there's a lot, I think the resilience that comes from is just being able to be a little more open to what your child can do and the resources that are out there and what you need to do with them.
Absolutely. And you talk about change, and, in parenting, change happens constantly, no matter what. And I think especially with, difficulties and challenges like this, the pendulum swings even further. Right. And yes. So being okay with change, being okay with, and setting those standards before you go out. Like, we are going to go out and our goal is to get to the store and to come back, right? We're going to get to the store. We are going to maybe hold hands. We're going to go up and down a couple aisles, and then we're going to come back. Whether you get something and it's productive for what you need to do, but doing these smaller tasks, right, would be an act toward working toward that functional life that they're looking for.
Yes. And, sometimes you have to start really small, but it was just, when I first start and I get a new student and I say, okay, we're going to go do this. And they're like, no, you're not. They just look like, no. So they come with us. And then they get to see, it's like, come with us, so they show up when we're eating out and they eat with us, and they get to know the staff and the other students and the parents. And then they're like, oh, this is okay, but it's just such a new thing for them. Sometimes they don't know that we have programs after they leave public education. There are programs, and the programs that they get into depend on how much they can do and how much we can teach them while they're in school. So we try to push them while we get the chance. So my students go out and they work at CVS, they work in Walgreens. And if they do that, they ride a community bus, they know how to pay, they know how to give them the bus passes. Then when they leave us, they can go into a program where they can get a small paycheck. Sometimes they can actually, we have like warehouses where they work and they assemble things, and they work, it's a job. They have to come to work, they have to do everything they're supposed to do. And if they don't, then they're out and another person gets to come in. So they need to learn all of those skills so that they can earn their own money. And we all take pride in earning our own way. You know, when we were trying to earn the money to go to SeaWorld, it was a lot of money. And there was some issues, and the school board actually offered to pay for our trip. And I stood up in the meeting and I said, no, my students want to earn their own money and they have the right to do that.
Mm.
And so they did. They earned it all. And they felt pride in watching, you know, the thermometer go up. And we forget that even though someone has a special need, they're still a person first. And they have the same needs and wants we do. They just have to sometimes go about it a different way.
Right. I was actually just earlier today, I was reading through an article on Instagram, and it was talking about, though, this is someone that classifies herself as autistic, and she is on the spectrum, and she was talking about how that autistic people are not given the same freedom to have diversity within themselves as typical, what you call it, neurotypical people, right? I am one that there is no normal. Normal is just the average of abnormal, and so. But I do see her point, kind of what you were saying with the teachers on campus and things like that. Like, oh, you can't bring them out of the classroom. You can't, they need to stay in this box, right?
Right.
They have been diagnosed with this, even though everything they've been diagnosed with is all over, no pun intended, but all over the spectrum, right? And so even though they're all so different, they're being, put into this literal box of a classroom and stay there nice and neat. So we don't have to worry about you. We don't have to deal, with you. And so I'm just so thankful that there's people like you out in the world, out in communities that can truly reach in and have yourself have, the vulnerability and discipline and vision and resilience to get out there and help these children and these families so that they can go and lead successful, functional lives. And it is a possibility. So I'm just so thankful for that. And I want to transition over to this wonderful book series that you have. And this is all about Queen Vernita. And I want to know all about her and how you are using this character to transform families.
Well, it actually started when I was getting my credential. It was an assignment in my math class. So when the very first one I wrote, I actually had my students in it, and it was called Queen Victoria. And I got a grant from Cal Poly, and we went around to the elementary schools and we did these little skits. And I would go back the next day and I would explain my students' behaviors and their disabilities too. We did it up to first and second grade. So when I decided I wanted to publish it, I then named it after my grandmother, Vernita. And everyone in the first book is a member of my family. This is my mother, and this is her birthday in September. So the format is that it has 12 months and the Queen has 12 visitors. And then there are 7 activities for that month. This one is the first one. It's pre-K. This is my nephew. And so I started winning awards and getting interviews, and everybody was, well, what are you going to write about it? Well, I love to travel. Got that from my grandmother and my mother. So the Queen travels around her kingdom and learns about the different areas. So I'm now publishing my 13th book. It's won 70 awards so far. This summer it won a bunch of film festival awards, and one of them was the Conquering Disabilities with Film Festival. And I won that because I have some of my students in my books. And this is Connor, and he was my student for several years. And he moved down from his dad his dad's house, and he was having, oh my gosh, he was having a really hard time adjusting. And so it was pretty difficult when we first got him, but his dad let me put him in the book, and he has a communication device because he's nonverbal. So he's teaching the Queen all about his communication device and why he uses it, but they're also learning about the Volcanic National Park. So in my books, the students I've usually put about 2 in each book, and they're just children who are living their lives. Him and his dad are at the Volcanic National Park, and he's teaching the queen about its communication device. So if a child is reading this and they're like, oh, and it's just 7 facts about it, and if they see a child on campus with a communication device, they'll say, oh, okay, they're not playing video games, or how come they get to have theirs? It's how they're communicating. So we need to address the device. And even if a parent is reading this and they're working in the community and someone comes up with this iPad or whatever, and they're like, you know, what are we doing? And then they know to look at it. And then this is how the child is trying to communicate with them, or the adult, you know, whoever's using it. This one, this little girl, she has Rett syndrome, and her name is Ireland, and her mom's name is Heather. And they're making lays for her classmates, and mom is helping. So she's explaining Rett syndrome and why she has to help her daughter. But in the book, she's got classmates, and she goes to school, and she wants to make something really beautiful for her friends. And so she's just a child living her life. So it helps everyone understand that, again, they're just children.
That is amazing. A friend of mine's daughter actually has Rett, and so and I didn't.
It's so rare.
Yes, and I didn't know anything about it. She's Mackenzie is the same age as my oldest daughter. I think she's a little bit older, and she's just one of the most fascinating, almost had a little accent there for some reason, fascinating young women Mackenzie is. And I have just seen her mom and their whole family be so strong and grow so much through the last, 15, 16 years. And I don't know. I just watching their family, and they have a son too, who is quote unquote neurotypical, I guess is, but anyway, but how he embraces life with Mackenzie and takes care of her, and what they've been able to do for her. And she was in the hospital a lot last year with different things. And man, I was just praying for her and everything. And she was able to get out, and she's enjoying life again. And it really is fascinating. And I can't wait to tell their family about the book too. But seeing something that is familiar in a book that you're like, oh, okay. Especially if you have a classmate that comes in. I know when my mom was working in special education, like she would take her students into a class for maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day, a typical classroom, and then come back. And a lot of those students didn't know what to expect, or they were like, oh goodness, here comes, the special education, and who knows what's going to happen, because it can be very unpredictable, right?
Yes.
Sometimes. And so if even, whether you have, a special needs child or you don't, I think books like that are so important. So we can be able to understand a little bit more when things come into our lives, into our classrooms, into our, churches, or wherever, that we can be more cognizant and understanding of them as a person, not just this special needs, right? They're a person before their special needs.
Yes. And we forget that.
Yeah.
We focus on the needs that, rather than, oh, this is a child,
right.
It's a child. That's what I was explaining to my parent there. She says, I don't know how to raise, a special needs child. He's a child. He's doing what children do at 12. He's just looking things up on YouTube, And so once we kind of got over that little hurdle, then she was perfectly fine. She's like, oh, okay. But it can be overwhelming, and it's like, no, yes, they're children. They want to go skiing. They want to go swimming. They want to go to the movies. They want to do all of that. A lot of times we take them to the movies, and sometimes they've never been to the movies. Their families don't take them. They don't know that they can go. And it's like, and so it's interesting. But this one I wrote, this is probably my 3rd one. And I wrote it with my little brother. He's an astronomer at JPL. And he wanted to be the professor with the hair, and he has the bunny slippers, and it's teaching all about astronomy. But on this page is Jeremy, and Jeremy was one of my students, and his mom was actually one of our teachers, and he has Down syndrome. So Jeremy's learning about astronomy, and you're learning a little bit about Down syndrome. So it's just I try not to, like, somebody asked me once, actually I've been asked that quite a bit, if I'm going to write a book on special needs. And I'm like, no, because then it's about the special needs rather than a child who's living their life and learning about something. And it changes the focus of what it is that we're doing. This one is Jake, and he has cerebral palsy, and he's actually the son of a friend of mine. And so he's learning all about astronomy, and we're learning a little bit about a cerebral palsy. And this is my brother with his hair and the bunny slippers. So that's what he wanted to be. But one time we were doing a book event at an elementary school, and I read my Queen Bernitas to probably 40 or 50 kindergartners, and he was doing the third graders. So his took a little longer. So I was standing in the back of his performance, and he introduced me and who I was, and this little boy spoke up, and his sister had just passed away. And she was in one of our classes. She wasn't in my class, but she was in a special needs class. And so he started talking about it in front of everyone. And we let him talk. And then afterwards, we gave him a set of books. And the teacher said that he hadn't talked for weeks because of this had happened. And just because I was there and I'm doing what I do in my life, he felt the connection to me. And he got to open up a little bit more about what had happened to him and his family. And that's what I tell people if they're out and they're, just like you, and you're talking to the public, you go with a certain thought in your head. This is what we're going to talk about. I was going to read my book, so we're going to learn about calendar. Well, we learned a whole bunch of other stuff we didn't know we were going to learn. And so you have to be open to that. You have to know what your audience is doing and what it is that they need from you. Sometimes it's not what you think.
I'd almost say many times it's not what you think. I have definitely learned that as a homeschooling parent. Okay. Well, before we wrap up, I definitely want to get from you if there is any, I don't know if there's anything quick that you can do, but any tips for either parents of special needs or just any parent out there regarding, special needs. Is there something that you can just leave our listeners with so that they can make a small pivot this week in a direction of more resilience or disciplines, vulnerability and understanding? Anything that you want to say?
From the parent's perspective, remember that your teacher is your support system. And if you're in a meeting and it can be overwhelming, there could be 15 people there. If you don't understand what's going on or you don't agree with it, you can stop that meeting and say, you know what? I don't want to do this right now. I want to think about it. It's your meeting. And if you don't understand what someone is saying or you don't agree with them, then you tell them. If a child is acting differently at home than they are at school, you need to tell the teacher. Sometimes things are happening in the classroom and we can't figure out what it is. And then we'll have a meeting, and after a while the parent will say, well, they do this. And we're like, okay, now we understand what they're doing in the classroom. You need to be more open about what's happening. We're not there to judge you. We're there to help you. So
that is so important. I know I've heard those meetings can be, very challenging, anxious, right?
Yes.
I see friends of mine that post or talk to me and they're like, oh, we got the meeting next Tuesday. We'll see how it goes. I hope it's better than last time.
Yeah, they shouldn't feel that way. They should have a good communication line with the teacher. And I do a lot of discussions with them, usually before the meeting, so that by the time we have the meeting, we all know what we're talking about. We're all on the same page. And unless something just comes up out of the blue or something, it's usually pretty open. And the parent needs to make sure that they're talking to the teacher. You shouldn't go into the meeting feeling anxious. It is overwhelming. You've got all these professionals in there saying all this stuff about your child. And it's like, but it's your child.
Exactly.
You're the expert on your child. So.
Right. And it's easy to feel like, oh, they must know more about this than I do, especially if you're going, I don't know what to do, but you are so right. You are the expert on your child. And that is your role as parent. So thank you so much for being here and bringing awareness to this. Thank you so much for the books. I think those are priceless. And I can't wait to have all of our listeners go out and take a look at them and share them with the world around them, because I love your approach to them. And I totally agree. You don't want to do a book on special needs, but it's about people living with special needs in the world and experiencing the world. So Thank you so much for the work that you do, for the love that you have, and for the pivots that you are making in all of these families' lives and all of our listeners today.
Oh, thank you for letting me talk.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And for all of our listeners, thank you again for listening to another episode of the 6570 Family Project podcast, where we are building the foundations for ourselves, our kids' futures, and our family as a whole. Have a great day, and I will see you next week.